Peaceful protests, not in the streets, but in North County restaurants. The new resistance to pandemic health orders. Undoing the Trump legacy on immigration. President Joe Biden makes it a day one priority. Reaction from our Spanish-speaking community on this major shift in U.S. policy. And a sudden change at the top for San Diego's public schools. The district loses its leader during a challenging time. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me on this remote edition of the Roundtable, reporter Kayla Jimenez of Voice of San Diego, KPBS education reporter Joe Hong, and Lilia O'Hara, editorial director for the UT en Español. America welcomes a new president this week, and we'll devote much of our show to that step forward in our history. But first, the urgent threat that now transcends two administrations, the COVID-19 pandemic and how we're facing the grim challenge. We're now more than a month into our latest lockdown, and some businesses are putting up what they call their own peaceful protest by opening their doors to in-person dining in violation of public health orders. Kayla Jimenez is covering this for the Voice of San Diego, and she joins us here again on the Roundtable. Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me back.
Well, the headline of your in-depth piece is how Carlsbad restaurants became ground zero for coronavirus defiance. Set the scene for us and why this part of the county stands out.
Yeah, so when I went to Carlsbad Village last Thursday, it was pretty clear to see defiance from these restaurants against state health orders, and they were pretty open for outdoor dining service, even though that's supposed to be closed down since San Diego County is in the purple tier. Many of these restaurants in Carlsbad were publicly flouting those rules by doing that and calling that a peaceful protest, and you could see those signs outside of their doors. It's not really a secret that many restaurants across the county are defying those orders. You can even drive down La Jolla and see that, but it seemed to be a coordinated effort by a lot of the restaurants in Carlsbad organized that they had these signs that it was a peaceful protest. But there is some news. Carlsbad City Council actually voted on this Tuesday to increase enforcement of those restaurants. So that is something new.
But they are arguing it's some kind of constitutional right. They've got the signs out there and maybe feel there's strength in numbers. Have we seen much enforcement so far, or is it too soon since that vote by the council?
Yeah, too soon to tell so far. Encinitas did a similar action recently. They threatened to take away those outdoor permits where restaurants are holding outdoor dining on public property. And Encinitas did see some results. Some people complied and some didn't. So it's going to take some time to see, and I'll be watching what happens up there.
And so far, though, in Carlsbad, they're sticking to their protest now. And the phrase peaceful protest, it alludes to the scenes we saw last summer as it relates to social and racial justice. Now, is that intentional, or are they trying to equate the two causes here and link on, kind of piggyback on that?
You know, that's a good question. I've been thinking about that one a lot. It wasn't clear. I talked to Michael Curran, who represents several businesses countywide, but about 60 of them in Carlsbad, and he's been advising those businesses to call it a peaceful protest and say that it's their constitutional right to be open and kind of have the sign up. But other legal experts that we talked to who are tasked with enforcing that order have kind of disagreed with that interpretation and said if they're engaging in civil disobedience, then they're accepting the fact that they are violating that law.
You know, and it's a tough thing. I mean, it sounds like it could or, probably will end up in court at some point. But everybody wants these restaurants open. Everybody wants the pandemic under control. Everybody wants vaccines to be granted. I mean, the goal long term is the same for everyone. But here we are caught in this in-between time. And some of those taking part in their peaceful protests, they've got support in high places. North County Supervisor Jim Desmond is often criticizing these restrictions. How have his actions given these businesses the confidence to do their own thing, at least for the time being, when it comes to COVID-19?
Yeah, since May, County Supervisor Desmond has positioned himself as one of the most high-profile skeptics of business closures due to coronavirus and has been actively supporting businesses remaining open. He represents Carlsbad and other swaths of North County and has encouraged them to violate those rules. He praised the Compass and some other restaurants in Carlsbad for staying open as well.
And the crux of that argument for Desmond and these restaurant owners is that the science isn't really showing that these major outbreaks and the surge we've seen in these cases and hospitalizations and deaths, unfortunately, can be traced specifically to restaurants. There's other businesses. There's family gatherings over the holidays. I mean, isn't that the basis of their argument?
Right. And he's also saying that the businesses have no choice but to be open, and they're going to falter. And those people are suffering, employees and those business owners.
So again, looking at the scene at these North County restaurants, are they busy? A lot of people supporting them at this point? Are the patrons coming back to some extent?
It definitely did seem like there was heavy traffic at these restaurants. There were a lot of people that were outdoor dining specifically. And then I even walked into Masfina Cantina, which is on State Street, and there were people inside of the bar. So it did seem like there was a lot of support for the restaurants being open by the residents in town who are still in support of going out and feel comfortable doing that.
So some division there, because you've got some patrons going and supporting the businesses and others complaining they should be shut down.
Right. You can definitely see the tension there.
Now, county supervisors recently decided to step up COVID-19 enforcement. You mentioned that they locally up there in Carlsbad and that area also voted that way. Would that apply to these businesses in Carlsbad? What action can be taken or has been taken elsewhere?
Yeah, so this does apply to Carlsbad. They voted last week to increase enforcement against businesses and other entities that are not complying with the coronavirus-related public health orders. And now their compliance team is being tasked with conducting proactive inspections, investigating complaints, and citing businesses for violating the rules. I talked to the Carlsbad Police Department, and a spokeswoman from there told me that that team has already served 32 cease and desist orders in Carlsbad since December. So they're seeing that, and then they're passing over, the police department is passing over those cases if those restaurants are choosing not to close to the district attorney's office.
So they can give some criminal sanctions as well as, I imagine the county has their licenses. They can shut them down, right?
Right.
Now, the pandemic itself, how's it playing out in Carlsbad? We hear a lot about hard-hit areas of San Ysidro, National City. The South Bay has really been hit bad. What's the situation in North County?
Yeah, there's definitely a rise in coronavirus cases and hospitalizations happening in North County along with the rest of the region, but not as many in Carlsbad as other areas of North County like Escondido, which has been hit significantly hard in the past few weeks.
Now, you mentioned complaints, how these are brought to the attention. Of course, we talked about signs at the outset and the fact that the restaurants are just open. Anybody going by, any police officer certainly can tell if they're open. Do you know if they're getting a lot of complaints and who's the parties that are complaining?
It was kind of interesting to watch at the city council meeting in Carlsbad this week that a lot of citizens were calling for their businesses to be closed in their neighborhoods. And so I know that they have reported them specifically in Carlsbad.
I mean, it's such an interesting tension because in normal times, these would be their customers. We'd all like to go out to a restaurant or have a drink in a bar these days. And, you know, it's all part of the sacrifice we've all been living with. And these business owners, of course, are directly hit and their livelihoods are on the line. Now, other stories you're pursuing when it comes to COVID-19 situation in North County, anything you're keeping an eye on in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, I'm definitely keeping track of the enforcement on restaurants in coming weeks, and then specifically on school reopenings and closures. I've been keeping a pretty tight eye on that.
Well, we can only hope for good news on vaccinations and the numbers coming down, both in new cases and, of course, hospitalizations and deaths is such a tough time.
Right.
I've been speaking with Kayla Jimenez, a North County reporter for Voice of San Diego. Thanks very much, Kayla.
Thank you.
This is a week of renewal and reflection for our country. The swearing in of a new president doesn't solve problems, but it offers the nation a new approach. Few have experienced the past 4 years like Latinos across the country. The Trump era saw the demonizing and separation of immigrant families, the fight to build a border wall, the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, and the uncertain future for dreamers. President Joe Biden dramatically addressed some of those issues on day one. Joining me is Lilia O'Hara, editorial director for the San Diego Union Tribune's Spanish language platform, UT en Español. Lilia, welcome to the Roundtable.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Well, first off, what was your reaction to watching the inauguration this week and the departure of former President Trump?
Well, seeing the inauguration, as much as we try to be objective and not to have any opinion on the fact, well, the ceremony itself was very emotive. When I started seeing, and I just had all these feelings that I didn't realize how nice it is to be proud to feel part of this country and to be an American and to have this nice symbolic ceremony. And it was just beautiful, I guess, and no, hopefully not just for me, but for everybody who was able to see it.
And President Biden took several actions on day one. As I mentioned, he changed deportation priorities. He halted work on the border wall. He ended Trump's attempt to exclude undocumented people from the census, underscored his support for the Dreamers, and he's rolling out major immigration reform. What's your take on the impact of Biden's dramatic change in direction and approach?
Well, I guess it's just one that shows that it has the truly intention to take the country in a different direction. And for example, usually in the first day, we are just waiting to see the articles about the ball and what fashion the first ladies are using and all that kind of stories. And yesterday it was just crazy. It was one story after another. And we just have to keep up. And so many of the stories were in the immigration area. So that was also something that it was a little bit of a surprise. But then it was all these 17 documents that he signed it, and it was like just show immediately that he was ready to start from the beginning. And at like 6 o'clock, I say, oh, well, I hope he's really going to sleep because this has been a long day. And he worked it a lot the first day. So that was really, it was, from the journalistic point of view, it was really great to see all this action in the first day. I guess I hadn't seen something like that since I've been doing the show.
Right. I wonder if the reporters got any sleep too, because as you say, it was story after story on important issues, day one.
Yeah.
Now, a bust of labor rights icon Cesar Chavez sat behind President Biden during his first day in the Oval Office. What kind of support does the president have with Hispanic communities? Is he a trusted figure, or is there some work to do, or do they just not know him yet?
Well, I guess he got the trust because he got the vote. He's there because, in the whole country, like about, it's a high percentage of Latinos that support him. That's why he got to be the president, because now we have a stronger voice than we used to have. Independently of that, I guess he has Cesar Chavez in his office, but he also have Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and some other art that is represent the inclusivity and the social justice that he promised in the campaign. So hopefully seems to be going in the direction to fulfill the promises he did. And I guess in that way, the Latinos might see that. And we just see it with the immigration rules that he's starting to put and the opening for immigration reform that the Latino community and activists and groups have been asking for years for that to happen, and it hadn't happened. And suddenly it's here. Of course, we need to work out the details. That will be coming in the next weeks. But that was just, I guess, a strong showing in his part that he's really willing to work in this inclusivity in the country.
Right, and it couldn't be more different from the Trump administration. Of course, Donald Trump famously came down the escalator and called all Mexicans rapists and denigrated people from Latin America throughout the 4 years. And I won't recount all the things we've talked about here and you've written about, but it was a different time, and it looks like a completely fresh start here now.
Yes, it is a fresh start. It's just hopeful. I mean, it just hope that it goes in the right direction, and it's a different era. Hopefully it keeps going that way.
And one other thing on day one, the Biden administration brought back the Spanish language version of the official White House website, taken down by President Trump. May seem like a small thing to a lot of people, but it really is kind of a signal, is it not, of a more inclusive tone?
Of course, it's a signal. I mean, Obama had it, and then Trump to remove it. And of course, I saw it yesterday, and I said, the Spanish vote, and I said, let's see it. And I'm also part of the Spanish Editors Association. And this morning we were checking like how well it's done. And actually it's a very high quality translation that they are doing. And I guess that also shows the respect that the government is having for the Latino community, because sometimes when you are not careful about the quality and how you're using certain language, I guess it shows that you just do it because you have to do it for any other reason. But in this case, it's a very good site. The Spanish that is used is very good Spanish, and it's very good sign out to the Latino community. Also, I guess it's important as a source to have information in the original language of a group. Because, for example, some people might question in the Latino community, the media, we put this information and we tell you that it's the truth and it's precise. But if the government has the information from the beginning in that language, people go and see, this media is good because you see they didn't share anything that is the government state. So it's one of the values, I guess, that it has to have original source in the original, in some specific language. And hopefully later will be, Latinos are the biggest group in the minority in the country, but later maybe include Filipinos or Chinese or any other language that also has a representation of the country.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really interesting point about the quality of the translation. As a non-Spanish speaker myself, I never would have guessed that. I learned something there. Now, another piece of history we saw this week was in the Senate. Former Secretary of State in California, Alex Padilla, is now Senator Padilla, taking over from Vice President Kamala Harris, her old seat. He's California's first Latino U.S. Senator. Your thoughts on this significant first for California?
Yeah, well, the Latinos, we were here before everybody else, with the Native Americans too. Then we came. And to have a Latino by the first time as a senator is a great step. And one important thing, I think, is not that he's Latino. He's good at what he does. Because all the previous jobs that he have had in Los Angeles and the Secretary of State, he has been effective in what he does. And I guess he's not representing just the Latinos. He's representing all California, but he's just perfectly able to do it. And we also have Mr. Javier Becerra now being part of the federal government. So right. I guess they are just two great examples of how the Latinos are rising, or they are being able, and the government has support all these people to show what they can do. And even we know they can do it, but sometimes they don't get the opportunity. But I guess that vision of being more inclusive, they have social justice, and be more fair with whoever is able to do some job, to invite them to work and work for everybody, I guess is just great.
Well, plenty to cover going forward on the new Biden team in English and Spanish for all of us.
That's true.
I've been speaking with Lily O'Hara, editorial director for the UT in Espanol. Thanks very much, Lily.
Thank you very much.
As President Joe Biden settles into the Oval Office, San Diego's top educator is heading east to join the new administration. Cindy Martin, superintendent of the San Diego Unified School District since 2013, will now hold the number 2 job at the U.S. Department of Education, pending Senate confirmation. And KPBS education reporter Joe Hong joins me now. Joe, good to have you back on the roundtable.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first, did the news of Cindy Martin getting this big job in the Department of Education come as a complete surprise? Were there rumors going around the district?
I hadn't heard anything, and I have to say it was a surprise. But, if you think about it, it really isn't. She's not a completely surprising choice, considering that San Diego Unified is one of the largest school districts in the country. And considering her experience here, it sort of makes sense to choose someone with their background. Right.
It's the second biggest district behind L.A. in California. And, of course, she's been there 7 years and solid experience on the job. Now, how did Cindy Martin land this job? And do we even know? Does she know her new boss, Miguel Cardona, the Connecticut Commissioner of Education that Biden picked as the new Secretary of Education? Was she angling for this job?
Yeah, that's hard to say. The district and Martin have been pretty tight-lipped since the announcement. I don't know if she and Cardona had a prior working relationship, but in the announcement, Biden said that he sort of praised her success with raising test scores and graduation rates in San Diego Unified. And it seems to indicate a desire to sort of scale up her success at San Diego Unified into sort of the national arena. And
what do we know about this job? It's Deputy Secretary of Education. It's a big job. It's not the top job, but it's right up there, right?
Yeah, so it's the second in command at the Department of Education at the federal level. So it can really range from everything from managing federal funding for public schools to overseeing special education policy, which is also sort of dictated at the national level.
And of course, she and her new boss, assuming they're both going to be confirmed, follow a very controversial Secretary of Education in the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos. And I imagine they'll be taking it in a whole new direction.
That's right. Yeah. So Betsy DeVos, she was very, pro school choice, an advocate for charter and private options. And, DeVos was not an ally of teachers' unions. She was very critical of sort of the political sway that unions have in this country. And Martin, at least, has a very different sort of approach in all of those areas. So it'll be interesting to see the contrast.
Right. And Martin hardly ran to the microphones following her announcement. What can we glean about what she'd do in the job? What should be the Education Department's priorities, according to Martin's most recent State of the District address, for instance?
Yeah, I think the key word for Cindy Martin has always been equity. So that just means giving the most vulnerable students the resources they need to sort of level the playing field. And so I think we'll see her continuing to push for that at the national level. I think she will continue to be a voice for struggling students, historically marginalized populations, and I think she is sort of looking ahead and trying to find new ways to serve students better.
And what kind of legacy does Cindy Martin leave as she moves on from the superintendent's job here in San Diego? I don't know if she was universally loved. I don't know if anybody in that job. It's always a lightning rod job when you're dealing with teachers and unions and students. And of course, COVID, it's been a tough time for any superintendent in a big school district.
Yeah, and this is sort of an opportunity to qualify, she has been a vocal proponent for educational equity, but, she has drawn a lot of criticism in like a lot of educational leaders right now for how the pandemic has been managed. A lot of parents wanted her to reopen schools, saying that students who were struggling the most before the pandemic are getting hit the hardest during distance learning and things like that. And there was a recent study that was published last year, or in 2019, showing disproportionate suspension and expulsion rates for African American students in the district. This is something that San Diego Unified, as well as a lot of other districts in the country, have just struggled with. I mentioned that Biden, in making his announcement, sort of praised Martin for raising test scores and graduation rates. I reported in 2019 when national test scores came out and state test scores came out, that the achievement gap between students at low-income schools or schools in low-income neighborhoods versus their counterparts in higher-income neighborhoods, the gap was growing. The test scores were getting better in these wealthier neighborhoods, but at some schools, the test scores were actually getting worse. So, Martin has been sort of this vocal champion for equity, but the district has continued to struggle nonetheless.
Well, she certainly, with her years' experience as a teacher and now as an administrator, will bring a lot of hands-on experience to the job that, of course, Betsy DeVos did not have. No background at all, really, and came from a wealthy family and wealthy donor background and not much else to bring to the job. So if nothing else, she'll at least have that experience along with the education secretary himself, who was a commissioner there in Connecticut, as we said.
Yeah, absolutely. Cindy Martin's background, she was a principal for many years at Central Elementary in City Heights. And there she started a biliteracy program, started a gardening program. So, like you said, she really does have that hands-on experience of being an educator.
Now, who's going to replace Cindy Martin in this job here in San Diego, which is enormously complicated, as we say, by the pandemic and remote learning for the time being, at least?
So her temporary replacement is Lamont Jackson. He's an area superintendent, basically overseeing the subsection of the school district that includes Morse High School in Southeast San Diego, Mira Mesa High School, and Claremont High School. And So far, they have him as interim superintendent until the end of this calendar year. So they have some time to find Martin's permanent successor.
So then we're going to permanently look for somebody, the famous nationwide search. Is that about to be commenced here?
Yeah, the district hasn't really released any details of what that search is going to look like, but, I don't know if it's going to be nationwide. Like I mentioned, Cindy Martin started her career locally and came up the ranks in San Diego Unified. So her successor might be coming from closer to home, too.
Yeah, and of course, complicating it is travel and getting candidates in and Zoom meetings and everything else we're dealing with now, not just in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting follow-up stories as we go through the rest of this year, and whoever replaces Cindy Martin as she moves on to Washington.
Yep, just another education story to follow.
There we go. Well, it's a busy beat. I've been speaking with KPBS education reporter Joe Hong. Thanks very much, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
That wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Kayla Jimenez of Voice of San Diego, Joe Hong of KPBS News, and Lilia O'Hara of the San Diego Union Tribune. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.